I remember before we were evacuated, there came the night that the Germans bombed Coventry. I was old enough to ask questions. We were standing outside the shelter in the garden, and I asked, why is the sky so red? And I was told it was the fires from the burning buildings. I asked what the noise was, and I was told it was the bricks that we could hear falling. Earlier I'd asked what the noise of the planes were, and afterwards I was told that the noise of the planes lasted half an hour. That's how many planes went over to bomb Coventry. It was almost obliterated. So this is the kind of tension and fear that we lived with before we were evacuated. But I fully believe this had its effect on the children everywhere who lived through that sort of thing, never knowing whether the bomb was hitting your house tonight or somebody else's. When we came back to Birmingham, I can remember I was still a very withdrawn, sensitive child. I remember one day listening to my sister playing the piano, and I was in the window sitting in the window staring out to the garden, thinking I was alone. I let all my feelings show. I didn't realise my father was working in the garden. He suddenly stood up, stared in my face before I could change and hide my feelings. Later that day, he said to me, "How is it possible for a child like you to have such sadness?" I was aware that I wanted everybody to be kind to each other. We were not kind to each other. My mother repeated the story often that she was not supposed to have any more children after 2 because she did not have good health. And that meant I, as the 3rd child, gradually registered that I must have been a problem, and it would have registered with the other 2 children that came. One of the remarks passed during one of these terrible arguments were, "You're a mistake. You should not have been born." Now, people said, "Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you." Well, I learned that words do hurt, and I believe people have been very, very damaged by terrible things that have been said. I know that I was puzzled as I became a teenager, and on a Sunday I would go and visit my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother. I used to love going there. I was the only one of the children that did do that. And I would get there for 4 o'clock as she was finishing her afternoon rest, and I'd put the kettle on as I went through in the kitchen. But I loved going there, but she would say to me, "Carol, try and be a nice girl like your sister. Try and be a good girl like your sister." It was many years later, when I was grown up, and I went to work with my mother's sister, that after a while, my aunt said to me, "I don't know what all the fuss was about. You're really quite a nice person." Then the penny dropped. My mother would visit her mother and sister every week, and it was my mother that had said I was such a bad person. I realised my mother, being, as she was, hypercritical. Many years later, of course, I realised she must have grown up herself with this kind of being under a microscope. And she probably was not aware she was doing it. But whenever I was with my mother, I felt very tense. I did not relax. I would be waiting for some criticism. I felt very much disapproved of and never quite making the grade. This had a terrible effect, which manifested in a way quite surprisingly. I began to treat my eldest sister more as a mother figure. And I didn't understand what I was doing until somebody at school said to me, "We saw you the other day in town at the weekend." I said, "No, it wasn't me." They said, "Oh, it definitely was." And I realised it was my sister. And gradually it dawned on me, I had wanted to be approved of. I now walked like her and I talked like her. One time at school, some girls said to me, "Who on earth is your sister? Who on earth is so-and-so?" They said her name, while keeping this anonymous, of course. And I said, "Oh, that's my sister." They said, "Oh, we thought it was God."